Welcome back, everybody, to the Meaning of Money podcast here. We've got a really great guest joining us today, Rudi from Ree Think Podcast. I'm going to introduce him in a second, but first, just a quick reminder that the Meaning of Money is a live show for founders, investors, and families who have already made money and are now focused on what wealth should make possible. Like to explore what comes after financial success, things like freedom, family, purpose, investing, and of course, legacy. And I'm really excited here today in kind of the tradition of bringing together people from around the world. Today, Rudi joins us from Switzerland, and Rudi is the founder of Rewire Ventures and the host
Yes.
of Rethink Podcast. Rewire Ventures operates a integrated ecosystem that is designed to generate insight, build trust, and de-risk investment in the convergence that we're seeing between technology and neuroscience. So I'm looking forward to, no pun intended, picking your brain. Welcome, Rudi.
Thank you, Stefan, so much for this opportunity and for having me. A very great introduction. In particular, I was thinking about your theme of your podcast, and I was thinking that Switzerland is quite a fitting country for that because we find a lot of people and families in particular after they made their money and their wealth that they headed to Switzerland and enjoyed a good life.
So I got a question for you on that, and this is one of the fun things about the show is I've been able to bring people together from around the world, and
Hmm.
not surprisingly, there's different points of view in terms of how to think about money and how people invest that money. I was speaking to one person, actually also a venture capitalist in Europe, a different part of Europe, not in Switzerland, the other day, and he had mentioned to me that one of the things he finds interesting is that, you know, in the U.S., when there's big exits, you tend to see a
Hmm.
lot of people reinvesting back into new ventures,
Yeah.
uh, starting their second or third or fourth business. He said in his country, and I think he was referencing Italy in particular. A lot of people, when they have build extraordinary wealth, they tend to just hold on to it and put it in things like real estate and very traditional conservative assets, which on the one hand is good. On the other hand, he worries that there's an underinvestment going on in terms of the new generation, new technologies, new ways of doing things that is needed to help all economies continue to evolve and stay vibrant. Where does
That's,
Switzerland fall into that mix,
oh
Rudi?
my God, I love this. I love these questions in particular because I think this is one of the things which I believe like Switzerland has to view the US from a different light. So maybe to unpack this because it's a quite difficult answer with different layers. So in particular, I can tell you like the Swiss mentality is very similar to the one from Italy. So what you see in particular, it's improving, but what you see often is that people tend to either build, let's say, companies which sustain or create their wealth, and they have this company over the next maybe 50 or 200 years. So you have a lot of families that come from generational wealth. And then you have sort of like the new money, so the classical entrepreneurial stories with an exit. And funny enough, you also see most of this like in particular if it is a real big exit that they build a either they join a multifamily office or they build their own family office, also depending on the exit amount, of course. But what you see in particular, referencing to the like let's say established families, that their investment appetite is very much de-risking. in that sense. You
Mm.
you don't see exactly what you mentioned, like after a big exit, that a lot of reinvestment happening. And this is very interesting because we have like a couple of different things going on which are not in particular aligned. So for instance, Switzerland tend to be very, very innovative. So we are like the country of the hidden leaders. So hey, we have a lot of like really companies that are not that famous, but they are leading in certain aspects of the industry. And we have a lot of patents and all these different things. And for such a small country, we have also a lot of like we have a lot of like Fortune 500 companies that stem from Switzerland. But nevertheless, what we have is in particular there is this missing capital layer for, like, let's say startups and all these, let's say, more risk driven um, uh, uh, ventures that we are like still missing. And I they're still like they're the good thing is people are realizing that, and there are efforts to let's say to alleviate that. So one effort is, for instance, and that's fairly new, is that pension funds have the possibility to access venture capital as a asset class. And this is something that is like in
Is
the
that,
US this
is
is
that new in
coming.
Yeah, is that new in Switzerland? Is that
It's very new, and but you have to imagine the implementation of that, because I was in contact with one of these like consortium that are like they try to enable to do that. It's like it's like it's almost like it's the wrong people doing this, because you have to imagine they saying all the right things, they made the right analysis, they understand the mechanism, but when it comes to application, these are not the people that understand that when you do an investment in startups, these are inherently risky things. That's
yeah.
why you have risk adjusted returns eventually. But it seems they don't understand it. It is almost like a cultural thing, in particular in Switzerland, to always play it safe.
So,
And
que-
and
question for you. You mentioned there's some things that are slowly beginning to change. There's awareness that this needs to happen. Is that being driven from the bottom up, from the younger generation, or are you seeing an awakening in the old dogs and these guys starting to you know
I
realize
think,
that it's important and they're driving it,
yeah, I
or is
think
it
it's both. It's
both?
both. I think the innovation is still there, the hunger is still there, or is rising, and you see more startups. So you see like venture capital as an asset class is on the rise. But and also you see from the institutional side things are moving, but not as fast as the US. So, for
Right.
instance, what I mentioned, like the efforts that they have built, that they have this vision for 2030 of Switzerland, that they want to be a unicorn factory. And one of these particular measurements is to pour more money in like, for instance, early stage investment. Because like late stage investment, you don't have a fairly big problem with finding money in Switzerland, but it's early stage investment. So there is like, all, as I said, like the old dogs, they see in it as well, but the movement and the implementation is poor. And on the other hand, what you still see like that is very, let's say, preferred, is things like the classical private equity cases, where you have also a cash flow business, they which will be bought and then later eventually sold. So they tend to avoid the riskier ones. But I don't understand it, because there's so much wealth here, and I think we could just own specific industries if we want to, because the money is there.
So, what about AI in that context? I mean, one of the arguments that I heard made the other day was that money used to be a barrier to creating new companies. And I
Hmm.
was actually interviewing another venture capitalist, and he had shared with me they've got a portfolio company where it's not indicative of his whole portfolio. It's kind of a standout example, but there's two guys that built a business that are generating tens of millions of dollars a year, and they have no employees.
Yeah.
And in that context, the startup capital that's needed is human capital at the founder level, figuring out what business you need to start
Yeah.
and why.
Yeah.
Who do you want to target? How do you add value for them? And with the benefit of agentic capabilities today, it unlocks paths that were not possible 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Where does that fit into the picture here? Is Switzerland embracing agentic innovation at light speed, or where does that, what is it like on the ground there?
Yeah, I think there are different pockets. Of course, like everybody is embracing their version of AI. Although I believe like when we look at the corporate side of things, I don't think that they really can implement it in a way that is really let's say tenfold their productivity. However, exactly what you mentioned, like what we are going to see more and more is that we have maybe one guy um, building a company that usually needed to use maybe 200 employees. They do it with two, and they generate the same kind of revenue, and also other things like, for instance, um, prototyping, all these different things that we are currently seeing. I think there is a huge step forward, and I also believe like the algorithmic side and like the insights we can create, all these things are tenfolding, and we see that. However, there's also like, for me at least, I can see also the other side, that we are in a way in a bubble, because on the one hand you have like this tremendous productivity gain, but on the other hand, there's also like an index for automation and all these different things. AI is not perfect, and you have like this super reality of AI, what it could be, and everybody like is on the hype train of that. And then
Yeah,
we have the actual reality, which is also amazing, but it comes with a caveat. And I think we what we see is, yeah, maybe we can build things that used to need capital of, let's say, 2 million, and now it's 200K. But we had this always. We had it with software. We had it with everything else. I mean, if you, for instance, use your iPhone and you just have a look at this software suite, 20 years ago, this would be maybe 1 million in just the software suite. And now it's your iPhone and you bought it for 1,000 Swiss francs, or
yeah,
in the US dollars. So you see this transition happen either way. And we see that as well. So I see a lot of innovation come through and is enabled by AI. And but I think we have to look really from a, let's say, grounded perspective of productivity gains. There will be breakthroughs all the time, but it's not uh, as fancy and as shiny as it sounds, although like the progression is rapid.
yeah. You mentioned that it's not perfect, and I smiled because at the end of the day, it's still human run, and human operator error is a guarantee. and
Absolutely.
it's very much dependent on the operator, in my opinion. Uh, an F-16 in the hands of somebody that's an inexperienced pilot is going to be a very different plane being flown than in the hands of one of the most experienced pilots in the Air Force. Just same tool, same environment, but very different outcomes.
I can
And
Yeah, that's such a great example. I can give you even another example, and I think that's why I love the quote of Warren Buffett's business partner. I just lost the name for a minute. Well, Charlie Munger. Charlie Munger. He says like, "Show me the incentive, I show you an outcome." And with AI, we have this two different, let's say, realities. So on the one hand, we have something like Copilot in the Microsoft Office suite. And to be honest, if you think about that, they have a share of in OpenAI. I think this version of AI it's rather the, like, from my perspective, this is a hypothesis that I have. It doesn't mean it needs to be real. It's like you have something that is implemented to generate more a generation of tokens so they make money on the back end, right? And not that it's actually changing the world. And that's why I said, like, for instance, if a corporate is implementing AI, I believe most of the time it will not work, because if something is not in the base layer, in the identity of a company, and you build the whole process and everything based on a new capability, it's always like a layer on top, an afterthought. And if you have this like huge corporations, you have all the people that are having different agendas. They are not so aligned in all these different things. And that's why I believe like AI in corporates most of the time will not lead to the promises of an outcome that we are looking for. But for open AI, it's great.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Rudi, because you did mention earlier that large corporates were not implementing it very much, and I was curious why not and where the stuck points were. So your explanation right now makes a ton of sense, because you're right. I mean, you've got to have a deeper mission that you're driving for, that gets powered or who's to power your efforts, in which case AI can become an amplifier.
Mm-hmm.
You're just slapping on as another tool without figuring out how to embrace it far deeper in the spirit of what your mission is, then you're not going to achieve anywhere near its impact.
Exactly. And I can give you an extreme visual example. So let's say Salesforce. Of course, Salesforce on the product level, they have their AI layer, and it might have a good use case. I don't doubt that. However, now imagine you and me, Stefan, we say, okay, we can build something better with as a competition to Salesforce. I don't know the exact number of the employee of Salesforce. It's probably 100K or whatever. And then now we can build eventually the same as Salesforce, but from the ground up with AI first in mind. And we probably built that software with maybe 10 people.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference. And that's why I believe like in the corporate layer, AI will not be successful, because there are so many different like agendas and incentives uh, working against like achieving what AI potentially can achieve. But when
Can
you
I-
build something from the ground up,
Well, I don't
that,
think that's from my perspective, Rudi. It's not uh, necessarily ground up, but
mm-hmm,
it's in my opinion, it's about, is it client driven or not? Because if
yeah,
you're building something that is designed to radically add value and just
yeah,
make something so much more powerful
yeah,
for your user, with
yeah,
your user in mind at every single step of the way,
yeah,
you'll crush it.
yeah,
On the other hand, if you're, to your point, you're looking at this as a tool for you to do better for you, well, you know what? Somebody may come along and invent a better mousetrap for the client, and then you are out of business.
yeah,
So, like,
yeah,
for example, banks in the U.S.
mm-hmm.
are inherently antagonistic to their clients, right? The question they ask, what is the lowest rate of interest
Yeah,
I can give Rudi while Rudi leaving his money at the bank with us still? Or
yeah,
what is the highest rate of interest, the most money I could take from him on a loan and him still do the loan with us?
yeah,
Which is inherently antagonistic. Whereas if you compare that to Apple, who you were talking with about a second ago, you know, Apple's not the cheapest phone out there,
mm-hmm,
but they focus day and night on how do I add
mm-hmm,
more value,
mm-hmm.
make it more useful, so that you'll buy it even if it's more expensive. And at some point they do that, and then you decide to upgrade, right? And they're constantly going, how do we make it better for the client? And that is one reason why I think they've been very, very successful. Uh,
Indeed.
the and why banks today are still terribly, horribly slow and not innovative and not And when's the last time the banking sector has really come out with an extremely innovative product or an innovative way to add value for clients? Nobody. You ask somebody, most people, I don't know. They don't even know what you're talking about. Like, what? Thanks. Do that? Like. And so to your point about large corporations and
Yeah.
even the sales forces of the world, what I find is that everybody's feeling compelled today to come out with their own AI app.
Yeah.
But from a customer standpoint, it's very rare that app is truly designed to be transformational for you and to bring transformational benefits. In my opinion,
Mhm.
it's just falling into the category of either we felt we had to do it too because
Yeah.
everybody is, or it makes things a little bit better, but it's not transformational. And then it's rolled out to be like it's just transformational thing, and it's not, and that kills authenticity with the users. And I mean, I remember there's an app that we use for very specific purpose, and I was in the middle of a billing negotiation with them because they
Yeah.
were trying to jack up rates for the next year, and I was like, whoa, why? What? And they're like, well, we came out with two amazing apps that AI-driven apps that are just
Yeah.
incredible. I'm like, well, I don't know anything about them. I don't use them. Haven't used them once. They don't add any value to me.
Yeah.
And so you're using that to try to raise fees on me, like, is a hollow argument, right? But in their minds, they're like, "Oh, wow, we're doing something so cool. We're doing AI,
Yeah.
yay," But
Yeah.
it's like they had forgotten how we use their product, how they really add value, and they hadn't done anything to change that. And that's where I think big companies are gonna get in big trouble, because a lot of companies are coming along with leaner, versions of something similar that might be a lot less money, might actually solve a problem in a better way for them. And I think incumbents need to watch
Mhm.
out. It's not so much about AI might be a catalyst out there, but everybody in business has got to be worrying about how do we add more value for clients because that
Mhm.
change evolves every year. And if you're to your point, it's not a new you know what was it Schumpeter that said creative destruction? I mean, it's not a new concept. Even if AI is the tool of the moment. So it's an interesting debate, and I say debate because I think a lot of big companies are debating internally, what the heck do we do with this? The funny thing is everybody rolled it out, right? And then
Mhm.
suddenly their token usage cost went crazy. And now they're like, well, maybe we shouldn't give it to clients.
Yeah.
And it's just you know uh, it's almost like they did it without any thought to ROI. You know,
Exactly.
and
And
I don't mean just financial ROI, but
yeah, yeah.
return on investment to the client that has to learn something new, that has to make an adjustment because you're changing how you do things. And I just think a lot of big companies forget to do that because
Yeah.
there's so much money coming in right now that in their
And
minds they must be
and
right.
and I feel like these are you touching on something very, very profoundly. And I feel like a lot of people struggling with this. There are like fundamentals that are not changing because I think when you have to always when you make a model of the world, you always have to consider what are the constants and what are things that are evolving or changing and what are the variables. And I think one of the things that most people, and that's why these hypes get created, and I have an idea where the hypes come from. The hypes come from the AI companies because from their perspective is like whenever they can sell you something and you use the token, they making money, right? So they have like their position of inflating their value in that sense. And of course, in order to create all these, let's say, mechanisms and all these like institutes and everything, you have to create a compelling narrative. And to a certain extent, we are always in one narrative, right? But then we have like humans, we are a constant. Like we are very predictable in our behaviors. And that's the reason why when a new technology emerges that of course the vision of it and the potential, this is clearly there, but the way it's transpires is totally different of what we anticipate, not because we not because the vision is not fulfilled. It's because of what you mentioned before. It's like now the downside of like having so much productivity means that I can do more bullshit as well. Like it's not that you can create all of a sudden more useful things, but you can create bullshit as well. And you know who doesn't care whether you create bullshit or a like a super app. It's of course like these companies that create the infrastructure for the AI companies, right?
That's
And
right.
the AI companies as itself. So coming back, like the fundamental question, and this is what you mentioned, is like what we are trying to build, is this adding value, and how we can leverage this technology to add value and add also value for ourselves. And I think this is always the end result of everything, and this is the thing that will change eventually. Of course, like technology is the amplifier, it's the tool, but it's not like it's almost, it feels like it's the opposite around. It's like almost like, we have this new technology, so now everything is, it's going to be solved. It's like it's almost a backwards thinking. But of course, as a narrative, it's easier to sell something that magically solve all problems, right?
Yeah. So, Rudy, an interesting other thing, that the reason I think big companies ought to be scared that we haven't talked about at all is engineering loops. Um, in my opinion, what Claude and ChatGPT, where they're really excelling more than anybody even begins to appreciate,
Mm-hmm.
is what they're learning. Think about
Mm-hmm.
everything they are learning every time. They are being paid to learn, and they
Absolutely.
are learning so much about you and me and everybody that uses those tools.
Mm-hmm.
And what ought to scare the big companies that are not using it in a smart way, the 100,000 person companies, what ought to scare them is if you look at their business model and the way
Mm-hmm.
that they're implementing AI does not involve radically accelerated loop engineering to make sure that you're
Mm-hmm.
learning what is adding value for your clients, how your clients are using it, what they want, what they don't
Yeah.
like. If you don't have that built in, your rate of evolution is going to be so slow compared to the rest of the new competitors and the infrastructure companies. That's what ought to scare people.
Yeah.
And I'm not hearing enough people explicitly focus on loops. They're more focused on the line, linear measurement of efficiency and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
rather than they're interested in the line, not the circle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that if your business model is based on a line, and you don't have a fierce circle component to your business,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're in trouble. Let me
I s-
switch gears for a second. What and last question on AI that I want to ask you before I want to ask you
Sure.
some other more wealth related questions. But um, AI done right, can do a huge number of things
Mm-hmm.
well, often better than people can. Especially if you compare what it can do today, say like compared to 20 years ago. I mean, it's just insane what it can do today if done right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you would probably agree with me. There's some things that people can still do better or should do, not a computer. What are those?
Oh, 100%. I mean, at the end of the day, and I always take the example of Bloom's taxonomy, and at the end, like the highest level of intelligence is create something original. Of course, you can argue that agentic and generative AI can do that. I don't fully buy into that narrative as well. I think where AI is still like amazingly super great is like uh, having a lot of data and analyzing it and telling me what patterns are there. But I think when we move forward to ingenuity and thinking about like how to solve things creatively, and we use AI as a tool that enables us and help us to, for instance, like, let's say, it's almost like you have the chance of a higher level thinking, because, for instance, when you have like when you have like 100 employees, of course you tend to focus more on like bigger questions, and your thinking is more high level thinking than rather in the details, right? And I think with AI it's very similar, because then it's like, for instance, what I use AI for, and you mentioned loops, for instance. I use it, for instance, to help me learn better by engaging myself, because I know that, and that's something that is inherently human, that we are like really good, or we are addictive when we have like direct feedback, and we have like not we cannot anticipate what reward we get. So this is something that makes it as addictive, and this is why social media is rampant. But you can use the same mechanism, for instance, for, in my case, I use it for summarizing the books I have read. I use it very like in a way it's more engaging. It's more engaging if I just write with my AI. So hey, look, this is the book I have written. This is use the time the table of the content, and match it with the content, live content you find on YouTube, in order to have like a summary of the content. And I make a summary of what I have learned and match it with that, and tell me where whenever there's a gap,
Yeah.
challenge me on that, so I can improve my learning. And these are the things you see, like, I am the
But
one creating these
I, I,
scenarios.
yeah, I want to get you back on path here, Rudy, because uh, while I want to explore how you use it, I want to know
Hmm.
at very, very high level,
Hmm.
what are the things today that people can do and
Hmm.
do better than AI? Human beings. What is still human? What do we still do better? So you argue maybe creativity, right? In the
Yeah,
new is not being
yeah,
one.
yeah.
What else? What else? Where else are we still better than the machine?
Engaging with other humans, 100% engaging with other humans. And there's also something, maybe that this goes more into esoteric thinking, but I think intuition is a big factor. And when you look at the biggest scientist, the biggest thinker in the world, they always led with intuition, and that brought them to things we are still using today. So I still think that's something that is unmatched.
I love that. So intuition, creativity, and connection with other human beings.
Yes,
Love
yes,
that. So one last question here. You live in a country that's full of wealth.
yeah.
Um, tell me, so wealth. Where do you see wealth solving the most effective at solving problems and fulfilling the promise of money being great for what money is? And where have you seen examples of what example human problems that money doesn't solve and money
Hmm.
can't?
That's a really good question. I think, for me, what wealth does is it's enabled two things: time and leverage.
Mm,
And time is ultimately the most important resource we have,
yeah,
and leverage is like the rate of how fast you can implement things, and resources you can accumulate. I think money help with that. However, and and maybe that's the other thing, is like, money is a function of something that you receive by being resourceful. And I think, and that's why you see also people with a lot of money, maybe they have inherent it, that it doesn't lead ultimately to success. And I think that's also something, like, you cannot like use money to solve the problem of generating money, in a way. And the other thing, where I think it's not directly helpful, or it helps not solve that problem directly, although it might have an impact, is whenever you when it's your health. I mean, of course you can get the best treatment, But when you have something so severe that your body is stop working, then no money at all will solve that problem. So that's why I believe like we should see wealth as also as something that is beyond money.
Health, you're saying? Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And I, from a different perspective, I would say that true wealth is lived at the intersection of health, wealth, and purpose. And to your point, if you have a lot of money, but if your health is just terrible, you're not going to enjoy it as much.
yeah,
Uh, and so, that's an interesting thing to understand, because a lot of people, when they're in the pursuit of money, are so focused on that goal, and they think, okay, boom, I get an exit. Now I have it. But,
yeah,
2 decades of ignoring your health, and then you realize, wow, you have all the money, but you can't really enjoy it to the level that maybe you would have liked to, um, because you're dealing with all kinds of deeper health issues. So,
yeah. I would
I
I would I would even add something. I would add something, and that's Quaila, because what I have seen now at this level where I am, I have a lot of like super successful friends, like really successful, like money wise. But one thing that I starting to see more and more is also it touches to what you mentioned before is the quality of the experience, and I think something that is really, and this is not solved by money, it's not solved by success. This is something I would maybe accounted to your consciousness, is that you enjoy this experience. And I
yeah,
know so many people super successful, and you think they are enjoying life, but they are not. And the funny thing, that's something that can be cultivated by everybody. And that's something I don't think any amount of money can fix, because when you have everything and you are miserable because you don't have the biggest yacht, I think then is something fundamentally in your consciousness that is not working. And then I still think that I would pity you, because from my imagination, for my um, um, consciousness box of thinking, or my way of relating, is like, how narrow would your field of reference that something like that would bother you?
yeah. And it could be about anything, right? But it's just
Hmm.
internal anxiety. There's a
Hmm.
lot of internal anxiety that people of all wealth levels
Yeah,
today still carry.
yeah,
And I think that's important for people to invest their time and energy into, because there's no investment in the world that'll make your anxiety go away. There's no, um, even if you have perfect health and a lot of money, if you don't have a clarity as to who you are, why are you here, what are you meant to be
hmm,
doing, how are you contributing, you're gonna be feeling, there's gonna be a hole in your psyche, and
yeah,
the hole can't be filled with stuff. It can only be filled internally through spirit. And
exactly.
um, the solutions and the exercises and the work to be done inside, there's no, you can't buy a few extra tokens and skip the work.
Yeah,
That's all, man. That's the heavy lifting we human beings still have to do. So,
yeah.
um, well, and Rudi, it is so good to connect with you. I didn't get to tap into 1/10 of your, or even 100th of your, some of the other things that we've talked about offline. Uh, tapping into your study of the human mind and neurology, and I look forward to staying in touch and exploring those
Same.
subjects with you, in the years ahead. And thank you for making time today. It's been really great.
Thanks for having me. I had so much fun talking to you, and as you mentioned, like we had our conversation before, and I enjoyed that much as well. So it's always a pleasure talking to you, Stefan.
Thank you so much, Rudi.
You're welcome.